Welcome to the tutorial for the Mud Lab. This is the example rooms file that we give you, and I just wanted to briefly go over this file before jumping into coding up the program. So this is the example file. You could have other files, but we give you all this in the write-up. This starts out with the room number, a tilde, and then that room's description, a tilde, and then the exits out of this room. So this room is a square. You can have an exit to the north, the south, the east, and the west. So you have up to 4 exits. Room 0 has an exit to the south that goes to room 5. So if we take a look at room 5 has an exit to the north that goes back to 0. So if you go north from 5, you end up at 0. If you go south from 0, you end up at 5. So note that each room has room tilde, description tilde, exits tilde, and this goes all the way to the end of the file here, with room 24 being the last one. So the total number of rooms is equal to the total number of tildes divided by 3. Moving on to coding up the program. So the very first thing you want to do is set up argv and argc in main. Because we read this file in and grab the file name using argv and argc. So set up argv and argc and also set up opening the file. So with that, you'll want to make sure your program also compiles and do the very basic steps to just get the program running with the rooms file. So when you set up the file opening, you can test this by reading in the first line and printing it out. So read in first line and print. And that way you know that you are able to get the file from the command line, you can open it, and you can read from it. Compile that. Make sure you have that working. Compile as you go, not just once you think you finish everything in here. And then we'll move on to task 1. Task 1 consists of, first, removing this testing that we talked about right here in the file opening, and actually read in the file the correct way. So don't just read in the first line and print, but we want to use file streams to open and read this particular file correctly. So this is using file streams to open and read the rooms file. So we want to delete the testing. Oops, delete testing. Next step in task 1 would be to count the number of rooms using the tildes. So count number of rooms. And the way you can do this is by using getLine. getLine stores a line. Check to see if the line is a tilde, and if it is, increase your tilde count by 1. So the number of rooms is the count of the tildes divided by 3. So tildes divided by 3 is very useful for that. And again, a hint is using getLine. And the last part of this task, so task 1 is all about getting the number of rooms. So the last thing we're going to do is, once we know the number of rooms, we will make an empty array to store this room information. and we need to know how many rooms there are before making that array. So this is to store rooms data. So task 1, all of this is to count the number of rooms. Task 2 is all about storing the room information. So task 1 was to count the number of rooms. Task 2 is to store all of that info. So store room info. In order to do task 2, the room info, since we know it contains exits and their numbers, and it also contains descriptions and the room number, you will need a place to store all of that in an organized way. So I recommend making a struct or a class, and we just need attributes here. I used a struct when I built this, so the struct has the room number, the description, and then an array of 4 where each index represented north, south, east, and west. And if we had an exit, that would store the room number. If we didn't have an exit, I'd have a -1 there. But there's a few different ways to build this. But if you have the rooms laid out in a particular way in a struct or a class, that's the best way to do it. I'm going to talk here in task 2 about how to take that from the file. So again, this is about storing room info. The first thing you want to do is use the file streams to go back and read in the file from the beginning. So at task 1C, you're at the end of the file because we've counted all the tildes and we had to get to the very end to do that. So now we need to use our file streams to either go up to the top of the file, or you can close the file and reopen it, and that will automatically take you to the top. So go to top of file. So if you want to seek G, that will move you up to the top, or you can close the file, then reopen, and that will take you back up to the top too. So the next thing that we will do is we will store the triplet of data. The hardest part is the exits, because sometimes you will have a north exit, sometimes you won't. You'll always have a room number and a description, but the exits are the hardest part. So name and description is what I would do first, then skip over exits and just stop for a second and see if you read all that incorrectly and stored it correctly in your class or struct, whatever you're using. Then once you get that working, the exits are the hardest part. So a hint here is remember that switch statements exist. So once you have all of that info stored, then you want to close the rooms file. You are totally done with it. Once you get all of the information stored in rooms in the array that you made right here, you don't need it anymore. So close rooms file. We are totally done. Last but not least, we will do task 3, which is running the program, or running the game, I should say. All right, we have everything stored now in the rooms array that you created here, and then you stored all of the information right here. So the first thing that you want to do to run the game is you want to prompt the user with this character the greater than character. So super easy there. Then you want to read in the command. And you want to decide what to do after reading in that command. So this is also good for a switch statement. So this is do the command. Good for a switch. And moving the room is the most complicated thing to do, I would say, at least theoretically. And so if you are moving rooms, so we decided to go from, say, room 0 to room 5, then you want to change the current room. And the quit and look commands are the simplest to code, so I would try that first. So I'll put that as a note here, quit and look. Code up first and check. And once you get those going, try moving rooms. And then you repeat this over and over and over again until the user types quit. So prompt, read the command, do the command. So do the command would be a switch. If you move rooms, you'll want to have some way to keep track of the current room, and if you move it, then you'll change it. But task 3, honestly, is probably a little bit simpler than task 2. Task 2 is maybe the hardest. Task 3, C, and then in particular, the move command would be the hardest. All right, that is the tasks for MUD. And like I mentioned, if you need a little bit of help in organizing the room data, then I would recommend making a struct or a class called room. And this would contain either an int or a string for the room number. Definitely a string for the description. And then an int array, this is my preference, for exits. And this would be max of 4 exits, and you'll index into your exits array either with 0, 1, 2, or 3. So I would have each one of these numbers represent north, south, east, and west. So it doesn't really matter what order you put them in as long as it's consistent with your program all the way through. So let's say I have the index 0 and exits be the north exit. So if they all start off at -1, then I don't have any exits anywhere. So let's say I read in a room that has an exit to the south that goes to room 5. So in this part right here, in task 2B, store the triplet of data, name, description, and exits. If I see that to the south, I go to room 5, then I would change this from -1 to have the south have an exit of 5 for this particular room. And that is it for my hints for the MUD lab.